Diane, I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life.
All right, welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. This is Art, and we are here once again with another session of Hostile Solo, which obviously means we are down to Matt and Patrick. Usually it's like, oh, I like Taylor Swift. I like a Taylor Swift related event that recently was in the news. But not this time. We couldn't get the guys together. We know like Patrick's going to be out for a while because I think we mentioned he might have messed up his back a little bit. So he's on the mend for that. So that's good to hear. And yeah, he stepped aside because he was expecting another baby, and the baby's here. So congratulations to Patrick's family. That's obviously amazing news. I don't know what Matt's excuse is this week. No. So yeah, that's great news. And we hope to get something with me and Matt going soon. We've got some stuff. I know we've been talking about it, and I think we're going to start doing some of it. So in the meantime, we're going to do another session of Hostile Solo. And if you remember last time, we did the paperwork and the game steps to get out of port, start heading toward the hyperspace jump point, which was going to be about a 3-day journey. We did a random encounter which involved a sort of dead in the water shuttle floating toward Hamilton Station. No life support, no heat, and no response from the crew. So it was sort of, when I was listening back to it, I was like, oh, like there's a legal requirement to provide aid. And I think in this case, part of it is also like, if you're going in like different directions, the amount of energy burn, whatever it would take to change direction, slow down, like by the time it all happened, the thing's gone. So I think that looking back helped me justify like, why didn't I, we sent a drone and stuff like that. And maybe even that would have been hard to do, but whatever. And as part of that, sending the drone over, there's nothing that could be done for the ship, but we discovered that maybe there was like a loose panel on the outside of our ship that we didn't want to have jamming us up while we were in hyperspace. And then at the end, I was like, yeah, we're just going to then jump to hyperspace. There's a missed opportunity there. So before we do that, I want to rewind a little bit. And one of the things that this game has, let me bring up the rule book, if I can bring it in. Again, remember, last time they fixed resizing PDFs. One of the things you can do is when in the building plot section, there is like storylines, inspiration tables. One of the things is the passage of time. There's the random encounters, which we did. But there's something, I think, and it's in here somewhere, and I think it's called like spotlight. And what you can do whenever you have like a spotlight, whenever you have like a little downtime, here you go, spotlight. After relationships, confrontation, reactions, the fourth method of surprising yourself is via the spotlight. A character is highlighted by the player who hasn't done much for a while. It's basically saying like, hey, you got a little downtime, pick a character, pick a couple of, it says here, select 2 inspiration tables and just give them a roll. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pop this back out, get it out of the way. We're going to take advantage of that mechanic and just see what happens, because we have 3 days to burn before we get into the hyperspace jump point. So, I don't know if I created a table to randomly select character. It's not hard to do. These are all the ones that are official, but let me see if I did. Nope. Just clicking stuff, not making any sense. So the way some of the lock hotbar, I don't know what happened. There used to be a little briefcase here for your macros, but they might have put it over here. Let me just double check that I don't have criminal conglomerates, ship malfunctions. I'm gonna have 2 for display roll tables. I don't know why I have that. I don't even know what that does. Let me drop that in and just see. Oh, that literally does that. Okay. Let's remove that. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly create a random character generator. And I say that like it's, like some big deal. It's not a big deal. These are the compendiums. Let me see what I did. Hostile solo. Solo play. Let me see if I did something here. Spaceflight, building plot. Random crew member. I did do that. Is that on... Random crew member. Okay, I did do it. Okay, so let's just pick a random crew member. Again, the roll from menu still doesn't work. We got the pilot. Okay. I'm going to write that down. What I might do is JM pilot. I'm going to roll a second one just in case we need a second character. Random crew member. Boom, boom, boom. And we got the engineer. Adea. So again, remember, like, we've had this thing. There was a shuttle floating by, seems DOA. No souls on board, so to speak. They're all lost. And we've got a couple more, and there's maybe some time after that it happens where people are sort of kicking around. Now, JM, let's just double check his personal info. Sensible, doesn't take risks. That's okay. And he's got beef with Olivia for a past event. Okay, so we got that going too. We're not going to worry about that quite yet. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the inspiration tables, which we got right here. And we're just going to draw... So now, normally what you could do, I don't know if this would... Normally what you could do is you could pick one. Do you want ship installations? You can, and then you roll on a couple. I'm just going to look at all of these. And maybe what I'll do is I'll draw a second set of results just to play around. And as always, I have at the ready my oracles from Starforge if needed. But again, my hope is to really just focus on what this game provides. So looking at the results, we got anomaly, authorize, cache, threaten. I think in theory you should be looking at mostly personnel, and then you should be looking at action theme personnel. So it's like, personnel, threaten, and then maybe one of these. Down here we've got my sympathies and these three. Let me take a look at Adea really quickly just to get some idea. Her tough but scared inside. Okay. Tough but scared inside for Adea. And JM is sensible, no risks. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make this on the bridge. Not that it matters too much for the background, but we're going to have JM. We're going to have Adea. Captain's not there, so let's pull those two aside. And, the shuttles... Who's Adea again? Is she the engineer? Yeah, so maybe, she had a hand in, She had a hand in the drone going out, making the repairs to the loose panel as they're approaching the hyperspace point. And JM sort of, locking in coordinates, he's just sort of, it's mostly autopilot. It's not like, they need to 5x5 in the zone to arrive at the hyperspace point. But, so he's sort of like maintenance mode kind of flying. And Adea comes in and she's trying to talks tough but is scared inside. Okay. So she's trying to play it cool. And so she's, she walks over and she's like, we still looking good, Jam. And, Jam's like, yeah, it's going to be pretty routine from here out. Maybe let's say they're like a day and a half out from the hyperspace point. And, the first day or so was encountering that shuttle. Everybody's maybe obviously a little shaken. Again, it's one of those things, we've said in other sessions. There's a million ways that space can kill you. So the fact that it happens when they encounter it is not something that is new to anybody who's out there in space, but it's hard not to be human, right? You know, when you're just like, oh man, okay. It's something, you know, you're watching other people deal with the thing that you never want to admit as a possibility because it's so terrifying. So anyway, so yeah, they're sitting in the cockpit, and JM, you know, he's flipping sensors, he's hitting switches, you know, he's locking in coordinates. And Day just sort of sits there. And finally JM sort of looks over and he's like, hey Day, how's the ship? Is it okay? Is there something, you know, we should be taking a look at? And she's just sort of sitting back. Maybe she even has like a foot up on like an innocuous panel, like not hitting anything important, but maybe she's sort of spent a lot of time in the bridge, and she just, you know, puts a foot up and kind of leans back in one of like the co-pilot chairs or something, and she just sort of stays fixated out the window, and or, you know, whatever, you know. And for a moment, it's just every once in a while it hits her that there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. It's so black out of the window, and you can see, you know, millions of light years away. Obviously, there's, you know, it's not like you can't see other stars. There's no light pollution to, you know, be drowning things out. And maybe she's even seeing, you know, the wisps of the galaxy edge. You know, maybe there's something like that, and she's just sort of looking at it, but she can't stop looking at the black. And JM is kind of, you know, realizing Ade hasn't responded, and now he's kind of looking at her like a little more concerned, a little more furrowed brow, and he's not sure if he should just give her a moment or if he should push. Let's find out. 1 through 3 he pushes, 4 through 6 he gives her a moment. He pushes. So he's like, Adea, hey, you all right? And Adea kind of like, you know, shakes it off after a second. She realizes she's just drifted away. And, you know, again, it's almost like her biggest fear is how you die in space. Gasping, you know, your blood boiling, you know, just instantly. It just seems like it may not entirely last long. I confess, I think people might actually be able to survive in the vacuum of space longer than the ending of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Blue Water on Mars, you know, Total Recall might have you believe, but it's like her worst nightmare. And, you know, so every time, you know, when time passes and it's not something she has to face for a little bit, she can sort of let it get pushed to the background more and more. And, but when it comes up again, it comes hard to the forefront of her mind, and she just can't shake it. And so Adea is sort of looking out the window, and she realizes she's sort of drifted for a bit. And, you know, then she turns and she sees JM kind of looking at her, kind of concerned. And she's like, yeah, no. You know what? Does she open up? She opens up on a 1 because she's tough. Okay. She's like, oh, no, I'm fine. Sorry, I was just, you know, got lost thinking about, you know, the drone was out there, the panel's out there. Trying to figure out, should I do like another sweep of the exterior just because, you know, I mean, we don't want something going wrong when we're jumping into hyperspace. We're all locked down. And JM, does he buy it? He buys it on a 1 or a 2. I think it was pretty obvious that wasn't the case, but He buys it on a 1 or a 2. He takes out a face value on a 1 or a 2. He doesn't buy it. So he knows, like, but he also he's not going to push. You know, he already pushed. She didn't respond. He's not going to be like, no, you have to tell me right now. So he's sort of like, okay, yeah, no, yeah, let me know. Like, you know, we can coordinate on that. You know, we can, you know, I don't know if we need to set up something with, let's see. You know, you want to loop Tom in, you think, and she's like, no, let me take a look. I'll double check. Let me go back down. Let me go back to the mainframe. I'll double check, just do a sweep. And then I'll go to the repair bay and I'll just make sure the drones are set to go in case we need them. And JM's like, yeah, sure. Sounds good. And so Adea, she takes off. And JM, kind of looks over his shoulder a little bit as she walks out. And then he goes back to what he's doing. And he, so let's see if we can do something here. So, if you remember, we're sort of building out relationships as we go. Dell knows a dark secret competitive rival, but this was JM. Now, JM... Right, so Dell knows a dark secret competitive rival. So the in parentheses is the reverse. So JM, we're not going to have anything here. I don't know how I marked it before. But the reverse is, so she doesn't have anything necessarily on JM, but JM, notices her fear and is concerned. So now let's go to JM and let's do the same thing. We don't need JM on JM, so let's get rid of that. Adea notices her fear and is concerned, and nothing reciprocating yet. We'll figure that out. Let me just make sure. So there we go. So, yeah, one of the cool things I always was intrigued by with the hostile solo system was the fact that you're running a whole crew. And this is why I find it interesting, because then you can sort of develop these moments. They're all sort of, I just have to remember them. That's the real problem, because now you're sort of, all these different possibilities, forking from different events. But this is kind of what I like about all of this stuff. I said it right on, like, I feel like the Alien movies are best where the xenomorph shows up and everybody's just like blue collaring around a dinner table talking about hazard pay, and it's that crew or a Firefly. It's the crew interactions that take place. Out of Gas for Firefly is one of my favorite episodes. Probably a lot of people's favorite episode. But a lot of it, begins like they're all around the table eating before things start to go wrong. And it's just those moments where, like, these people have to live together. And obviously, the point of telling a story is to pick the moment that is the most, to make it the most dramatically interesting. But it's these little moments, I feel like, that often get lost when you're telling stories that I really like. So JM, he goes back to, punching the numbers, and he gets everything locked in. And he's not 100% sure what he should do. The engineer is a mission critical position, obviously. But, everybody has moments they just encountered something pretty rough. And so he's debating whether or not he should go talk to Doc Brown. So let's do this. We don't need a reaction table. Or maybe we could have used reactions. I don't know. But there's a lot of, like, emotional tables here you can use. Relationship table. We don't need that because we used some of that to establish background early, but now we're going to let these relationships develop as we go. So I think I'm just going to do a yes/no, like I've been doing. Don't need that. Resolution, don't need that. Curious what these are. Oh, these are, yeah, okay, so these are if you need like a random like motivation for an NPC. Anyway. So let's do a yes/no. He's JM, he's been on ships before. He knows people have moments. He knows, again, they just went through something pretty traumatic. But at the same time, you need your engineer in top form. Because if something slips by, it could kill everybody. So I think it's going to be... Man. I think on a 1 through 4, he goes to talk. Just because, like, you got to be safe than sorry. And on a 5 or a 6, he lets it go. 4. Okay. So he's going to go... he locks in the coordinates. He knows everything's good to go. Checks the sensors. There's not like there's an imminent collision with something obvious on sensors. And he punches in the coordinates and steps away from the... punches in, like, autopilot and then steps away. So he goes down to the sick bay. And what we're going to do again, we're going to get everybody lined up on the side. And as I go through, I'm going to do this every time. Just to have everybody ready to go in case we need them, so I don't have to pick and choose. And so Doc Brown's down there, and JM, maybe there's a button on the outside of the door and goes, and Doc Brown kind of looks over and realizes, sees on a little monitor, JM's face, and he's like giving a quick wave. She hits the button, door opens. And JM, maybe Doc Brown is sort of at the computer terminal, and she's sort of looking through files, looking through personnel material. Let me just double check what her deal is. She's selfishly keeping her distance from Del. She doesn't trust. She doesn't trust androids. That's definitely the case. Does Del have anything going on her? I don't think so. Yeah, he's got nothing going on. Okay, so, and shares a secret past incident with May, which I probably should have played into more when she dislocated the guy's arm. Maybe I did. It's been a little while. So, JM comes in. And, he's just sort of like walking around, and then finally he sort of steps over to the foot of the bed here, and he kind of just sort of taps. He's just sort of tapping, and Doc Brown's kind of looking at him, and she's a medical doctor, but she has to have obviously some level of psychological training, so she's sort of evaluating how to proceed. And she looks at JM. And he's always been kind of a straight shooter, right? Like, she admires that, he seems pretty level-headed. He doesn't like to take risks, so she appreciates that he's a lot of times sort of what you see is what you get in a good way. And so finally she's like, look, JM, it's okay. You can, if there's something you want to say, it's okay. It stays in this room, but it's okay. You're doing all right. He's like, me? Oh, yeah. No, I'm fine. And he sort of still looks a little distant. And Doc Brown's like, because it's okay if you're not. That shuttle's not an anomaly, but it doesn't mean it's not going to affect us. He's like, oh, yeah, no, I get that. It's like, no, it's Adea. And so then Doc Brown sort of spins in her chair a little bit and sort of crosses one leg over the other, folds her hands in front of her, ready to listen. And he's like, she okay? Do I need to? And he's like, no, it's not that. He just sort of looks at Doc Brown for a minute. He's like, I don't know her. You've got information that I'm not privy to. It's none of my business, but She seemed rattled. And I wanted you to know, because again, you've got access to stuff that I don't know about her. And she just seemed a little distant, a little unfocused. And it was just for a heartbeat. It wasn't even for that long. And that's why, I feel guilty even bringing it up, but it did strike me. And I wanted you to know in case it was something that might be relevant, and it was something that you might need to keep on your radar. We're going to be heading out pretty deep, and I just want to cover all my bases. So, that's it. I probably shouldn't have even come. And he's sort of half spinning on his heels to leave. And Doc Brown's like, no. Jam, when in doubt, like, you did the right thing. You had a concern and you said something. So, there's no harm in that. And I can take it from here, and we can go from there. And Jam's like, yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. And Doc's like, are you doing okay? And Jam's like, yeah, no, of course. Yeah, no, it's really sad. I hate seeing stuff like that. Nobody wants to see ship in that state, but, we'll be fine. And I'll be fine. And Doc's like, okay. And she believes him. She's sort of, evaluating in real time. And she's like, yeah, no, I for the most part, I believe you. And it's like, okay, well, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Jam. And if there's anything else that you want to talk about, or if you see anything else, just let me know. And Jam, again, sort of, what you see is what you get in a good way. He's like, yeah, no, I'll tell you, I have nothing to hide. So, if something starts getting to me, I'll definitely check in. And she's like, great, appreciate it. And so JM heads out. And so now Doc Brown sort of, closes out one file and flips open Adea's file. And, let's see if there's some inspiration table stuff that we can use what's in her file. Or I have obviously some stuff in mind. But we can go from there. Inspiration tables. I'm going to just take 2 results. So what we got is communications, leadership, creatures, my sympathies, overwhelmed, brotherhood, careless. Got hypersleep, crime, cold, executive, sees, labor, vengeful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take hypersleep and careless. And so in Adea's file, it sort of has her mission history. And on a past mission, we can even bring up, if I can remember where it is, ship names. Let's make it an exploration ship. The Orbiter. Okay. So she was a crew on the Orbiter. Was she the lead engineer, or was she sort of like the apprentice? 1, she was lead. 2 through 6, she was the apprentice. Okay, so she was the apprentice. And at some point I'll type this stuff in, but I don't want to make you suffer through my typos. So she was on the Orbiter, and it was an exploration ship. And so they were prepping to go to hypersleep. So they're prepping to go into hypersleep, and there was, okay, and what was the other? Careless, okay. Lead engineer screws up. Lead engineer is careless. So what was it? Was it rushed? Was it substance? Was it incompetence? So 1, 2 rushed, 3, 4 substance, 5, 6 incompetence. 6 incompetence. So maybe here's what we're gonna do. Incompetence. So I'm just gonna bring the book back in real quick because I want to show you something that they talk about specifically in this game, and it makes sense. Building plot, character inspiration, storylines. As a player, you're looking for storylines, connections between events and encounters that might have some extra meaning. You might be able to create a storyline quickly, or it might take much longer. We're going to start developing a storyline. And again, it's not like this isn't like, oh wow, I never thought of that. Like, this is literally, any storytelling. You're trying to create threads. So, but I like that this game specifically calls it out because, again, you're dealing with 6, 7 people. And so you're looking for, it's not just what's happening in the moment. You're looking for connections and everything else. So the engineer aboard the orbiter was very similar to our current captain, Tom Hunter. He wasn't ready for the job. Oh, let's see. 1 through 3 male, 4 through 6 female. 1 through 3. So the engineer, he wasn't ready for the job. He got it maybe above Adea, but more importantly, above other people that were more qualified. And she didn't speak up. She's like, look, this is my direct supervisor. I didn't speak up. And he screwed up. And he screwed up royally and didn't set some of the hypersleep chambers correctly. And maybe Adea even was watching, saying, like, I don't think he's doing that right. But she didn't, again, this was her, even though she might not have agreed with him having the position, it was her supervisor, she didn't speak up. And she's like, I don't know if this is being done correctly. But, like, obviously he must on some level know what he's doing or he wouldn't have the job, even though I doubt that premise as well. And, say 2 or 3 people died from faulty hypersleep prep. And so when Adea sees other people, like, she was in hypersleep, so she wakes up and sees the outcome of this screw up. And it's just a horror to her. And so when it's that idea of just being out here in space and space sucking the life out of you because, again, it wants to kill you. It always shakes her. So now she's on board a ship, where she's facing another sort of nepotism. I'm not sure he's right for the job. And it's gotten her shaken. So she's already a little like, okay, all right. Again, she tries to talk tough, but, she's scared. And like this thing is sort of stuck with her the rest of her career so far. And she might not even realize that the parallels exist, right? She's just, there's like this sense, like, this doesn't feel right. And she's maybe not expressly connecting it. Oh, if you remember, my previous supervisor was a Nepo incompetent, and now Tom seems to be a Nepo, and I'm not sure he's... No, so she's not directly making those connections. But somewhere in her subconscious, she's making those connections. So she's more likely to be on edge. And now this shuttle floating by sort of triggers almost her exact phobias. It's just, oh, that's the button right there that I'm going to press. And it shakes her. And so Doc Brown is looking at this, and, maybe she doesn't know all of these connections, but she's like, I think I'm going to need to keep an eye on her. And she's looking over her history. And maybe she's putting, maybe let's say on a 1, she's putting more of this together than normal. Okay, so maybe she's just sort of looking at it. And she realizes, like, oh yeah, she had a traumatic experience aboard the orbiter. Maybe seeing another, it's a little more superficial, a little more facile of a observation, and she just encountered another somewhat adjacently similar triggering event. Okay, maybe it's got her shaken. I'm just going to mark a note that I'm going to need to keep an eye on her. And, okay. And so she sort of checks that box. She types in maybe a few notes, and she closes down. And she closes down the file. So, yeah. So there we go. That was a little sort of spotlight moment. Yeah, so obviously that's, you're encouraged to do them. Sometimes they encourage, like, if other people are off doing stuff, you pick a character that's not doing something and you just see what they're doing with a little spotlight. I thought this was a good time. They had some time to kill, so I'm going to tend to probably use it in that capacity. So yeah, having done that, we get to the next day and a half pass, and I don't know if I got graphics for hypersleep. So, the crew quarters, whatever. So they jump into hypersleep. So they get into hypersleep. Doc Brown sort of oversees the panels. Ade is sort of there double checking, sort of engineering. She's making sure the cables are all plugged in, so to speak. Doc Brown's making sure, like, water, food, all the life support itself is ready to go, air, whatever it might need. The drugs that are needed to put you into the hypersleep state. And then maybe Adea, she doesn't have a connection with Del, does she? I don't think she does. They definitely do. Okay, so she knows a dark secret about Del, and Del is a competitive rival. Man, I feel like that should be flipped. I'm gonna flip that. So Del is her competitive rival, and now that makes a little bit more sense, given what she experienced before. She doesn't. On some level, she doesn't. I think I'm spelling this wrong. That's why. It's not that I spelled the E wrong. That's correct. It's that I flipped around. There we go. And I'm going to say that she doesn't know Del knows a dark secret. So I want to flip those around, because I don't think as an android he would necessarily feel a competitive rival in that sense. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to have that kind of emotional reaction to somebody else. But he does know a dark secret. And so the reason why I'm bringing these two up is because Del, he's an android. He doesn't need to go into hypersleep, but maybe he still needs to sort of go into some kind of sleep state, like, sort of like when you put your computer to sleep. I think the book talks about being in hypersleep, like, it can really mess with you. I'm sorry, jumping through hyperspace can really mess with you. And I feel like it's not limited to just people. I'm going to have it also affect androids in certain ways. I don't know what those ways are, but so it's important that even Del sort of goes into his sleep mode. And maybe he's the first to wake up. He can go, the ship can sort of power Del back on. And then he, hits the button and gets everything started. But he still needs to at least do something for part of it. So Adea and Del sort of pair off. And Adea, competitive rival, always is a little... Again, she talks tough but is scared inside. And those type of people, they can't hide it perfectly. And Del being, probably not like intuitive the way like Doc Brown might look at somebody with her psychological background, psychological training, be like, I feel like, she's showing me micro signals of this or that or body language or whatever. Del's looking at her and he's noticing like increased pulse rate, slightly elevated temperature. He's seeing physiological signs that, she's tense. And so he knows something. And so he doesn't bring it up, and she doesn't know that he knows something, but he has access to company records for Leyland Okuda. I think that's what it's called. That that most people, maybe not even Doc Brown, has access to. And so I don't want to be like, and then it's all connected. Like, so maybe it's not literally the orbiter. Maybe the dark secret is about something else. I don't want it to be, everything ties in exactly perfectly. But yeah, he knows something. We're not going to get into that yet because we're going to let that develop when we need it. And he's like, "Are you okay, Adea?" And Adea, she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. Come on, we just got to get you hooked up." And Del's like, "I understand, Adea, but I just want to be a reminder that you haven't checked the procedure checklist." And she's like, okay, I know, you're right. So she's getting flustered and she kind of, turns around and grabs the checklist off the wall, flips over to the page. And she's like, "Okay, we're going to do it by the book, if that makes you happy." She's a little testy. She's, a little on edge. And Del is like, again, in his displays, like, elevated heart rate, dunk, seeing like heat patterns sort of getting flushed. And he's like, "Thank you." And he sort of takes his seat and, assumes the position, whatever that might be. And he says, "Ready for hypersleep power down stasis." And she's like, "Thanks, appreciate it." And she's starting to, she takes a little bit of a deep breath, recenters herself. She realizes she's a little flying off the handle. She's trying to talk tough. So she's like, "I got to get this back under control." I'm sort of like breaking the facade a little bit. And so she, plugs him in, ding, 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 hits the keyboard, goes through the checklist, and turns and says, "Okay, I think you're ready to go. You set?" And he's like, "I'm ready. Thank you." And so she, hits the return key, executes the series of commands. And so she's looking at the sort of CRT monitor and she starts seeing text flying up as like, if you've ever like started up Linux, but you don't have like a splash screen, it just shoots through all the things it's loading, unloading, all the things it's checking as it goes. And then finally it goes and it says success. And as that pops up, she turns and looks over at Del and he goes, maybe he doesn't even do that. Maybe he just sort of, yeah, I mean, they're androids. So like they probably need some kind of moisture for their eyes. It's not like it's all plastic. So he sort of drops his head, eyes closed. And she looks back at the screen and runs a quick diagnostic and everything's 5 by 5. So she's like, good to go. And she, hits the lights on her way out and heads back over to the hypersleep chambers where everybody's sort of, half laughing, half, getting ready to go, getting into their, much like the movie Alien, you're not like fully dressed. Everybody's sort of getting stripped down into like, bare essentials, a pair of shorts, a t-shirt. And Doc Brown is like sort of looking over, standing above as they're lying down, and the glass enclosure closes above them. And she's like giving them a nod. And, you can talk through the glass. And so one by one, she's like, "You good?" And they, like give her a thumbs up, and she sort of checks the life support, makes sure everything's ready to go. And she's like, "All right, sweet dreams." And there's a little bit of like, I don't know what that sounds like. I apologize. Like a little mist enters and sort of swirls around the glass. And then you start seeing the person go out. And, so one by one, Doc goes through. And maybe she has a special arrangement where she can get in, like hers have controls on the inside. Maybe not, and maybe they all do, just in case they need to override. But obviously you can't override once you're asleep, so she, one by one, she checks everybody. She's getting all good from everyone, but she saves Adele for Adea for last, and everybody's asleep. And so it's now just Doc Brown and Adea. And Doc Brown, Adea sort of lies down on the bed, and she's, sort of shifting around a little bit, trying to get comfortable. And she's sort of like, sort of taking a few deep breaths. And, Doc Brown just sort of looks at her for a moment, and somewhat uncharacteristically, Doc Brown never struck me as like super warm or super motherly, but she takes Adea's hand. She sort of just clasps it for a moment. And she's like, "Look, it's going to be okay, but like, is there anything you want to talk about? We've got a little bit of time. Not a lot of time, but we got a little bit of time." And Adea looks at her and sort of, no, of course not. And Doc Brown says, "No, it's going to be fine." And Adea, she cracks. She kind of like, when you're almost about to tear up and you sort of pull it back right at the last moment. She's like, I know. And Doc Brown gives her a smile and then sort of releases her hand, but gives it a couple of quick pats. Says, "All right, I'll see you when we're at the other point." And Adea actually takes some comfort from that, smiles, and gives her a nod, like, yeah, thank you. And Doc Brown hits the buttons, the glass closes, the mist, and Adea's out. And these are the moments, so Doc Brown sort of like, it's not that she can check engineering, right? She's not trained in that sense. So she sort of looks around, she does one last check. She goes over to say maybe like a centralized terminal where it's giving all the readouts of the hypersleep. And it's like, Doc Brown, it's maybe still red, empty, but it's like 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. And so everything's looking good. And there's nothing left to do. She's just like, you just got to take the leap, right? It doesn't seem entirely like a leap because, it's somewhat routine, but yeah, at some point you got to take the leap. I mean, she's optimistic and determined, but that doesn't not necessarily mean motherly, but so yeah, she sort of takes a moment. It's a moment of peace. She often spends time alone, right? Because she's not technical, like she's not flying the ship, she's not repairing the ship, she's not operating sensors, navigating. So her discipline is a little separated, and she needs that separation because at some point she needs to be able to objectively evaluate the people that are around her in a way that, it's a real obstacle to becoming close with your crew. There's always a barrier. As much as she might like some of them, she always has to keep one step back in the way that other crew members don't have to. So she's often like a little bit of a loner, but this is a different type of quiet on the ship. It's almost like you can hear yourself breathing a little bit more. Because even like in the ship, you might hear somebody off in the distance, or you might hear a voice trailing through a vent. But now it's just nothing. It's just the beeps of the ship, the hum of the engines. And she looks over and there's like, maybe a mirrored display from the bridge down here just showing the basic hyper jump information in case they needed it, just to make sure everything's ready to go. And she's like, yeah, that seems ready to go as well. And so she hops into her chamber and, so she's sort of looking up at the ceiling and she's watching the glass come down. And then she looks over at a panel to her right and, she punches in a few commands. And she hesitates for a moment. Again, not worried per se, but she knows, once she hits that button, it's gonna go black. She goes, she just sort of inhales really deeply through the nose, exhales deeply through the mouth, hits the button, and the last thing she sees is the beginning of the swirl of mist in front of her, and we fade to black. So there we go. I have to say, this is not exactly what I thought the session was going to be. I wanted to highlight a moment using the spotlight mechanics because I feel like it was a real missed opportunity last time when I did not do it. But I didn't expect to make it be the whole session. But I like that it was, and this is hopefully the kind of stuff that happens more and more as we go. It's not going to be just like run down the checklist. I really would like to make the most out of these kinds of things. So hopefully that was okay. Again, this is Black Lodge Trivia Night. We are a tabletop RPG actual play podcast. Usually there's 3 of us. Patrick's going to be out for a little while. Matt and I... Sorry, I thought I was about to cough. Matt and I are going to be doing some stuff in the meantime. So keep an eye out for that. There's some things that we're looking to run. We might talk more about souls. We might just discuss things sometimes, however it goes. With the holidays coming up, it might start to get a little iffy. We'll see how it goes. But thanks to everybody who checked this out. Hopefully this was okay. I'm really enjoying this. Again, this is the Hostile solo system from Zozer Games. It goes with Zozer's Hostile setting, which is... There's also a rule book, so you can play it like a regular, classic DM RPG. But it's just basically like his Alien 1, the first Alien movie sort of setting. It's blue collar, it's space trucking, it's corporate jerks, it's just corporate exploitation. It's just exactly that kind of sci-fi setting, and I adore it. So anyway, so we got a Discord if you want to jump in, discuss RPGs, CRPGs. Happy to have everybody. Like, subscribe if this is your thing. If you prefer audio versions of this stuff, just search for Black Lodge Trivia Night wherever you get your podcasts, and the actual plays and our discussions have audio counterparts. But otherwise, we'll be back. There will definitely be more Hostile solo at some point in the future. Like I've said at other sessions, like this is the thing that I use to have, to play when we aren't able to get the guys together. So I'm sure that is going to happen at some point in the relatively near future, and we'll be back with more Hostile. And like I said, Matt and I will be back with some other stuff. So thanks again to everybody who checked this out. We appreciate it. At the time of this recording, we recently hit 400 subscribers, which is peanuts, in compared to other channels. But, I just wanted to thank the people who subscribed and let everybody know that we genuinely appreciate it. So hopefully, you're finding something that you like from the stuff that we make. So thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye. The in-session music was provided by Tabletop RPG Music and composed by Ian Fisher. You can find the Patreon at www.patreon.com/tabletop RPG music. That's all one word.